So we have two brain systems. One is I call the robot, but then you also have the cat. The cat is your emotional brain, it's your fight or flight. I took this PTSD approach and I had actually created a therapy called de-adrenalization. So yeah, I have a protocol for this. And if you work with me, then yeah, you'll know exactly what to do in real time before you go down the toilet. Well, there's this guy that I write about him in my book. His name was Tony, and he made $700,000 in his first year. This took him 6 months, but he lost all of it. It's not really about winning the battle because it's how to prevent the battle from happening in the first place.
Hi guys, welcome to another edition of the Trading Battle. Today we have a very, very special guest from the Snow Latin, Massachusetts. With us is actually somebody I think you're going to find very, very interesting because he deals with a problem that literally every single person that trades in the market faces, not just once or twice, but I would say every second of every minute of every hour of every day that they actually participate in this activity. And that is the big existential question of why discipline always fails under pressure. I'd like to introduce you today to Dr. Dave Bonanno, who is an author of The Consistently Calm Trader, a state of being we all aspire to, but virtually none of us achieve. So perhaps he is going to help us and let us know exactly how that's possible. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bonanno.
Hey, thanks, Boris. Great to be here.
Great to be with you. You know, sort of a little bit of a background for us. You're a clinical psychologist or psychologist? Psychiatrist, I'm not sure.
That's right, clinical psychologist.
You're clinical psychologist. So that is certainly a discipline that does touch on trading, but clearly a much broader, bigger discipline that deals really with quite a lot of psychological issues. How did you even, discover the world of trading, and how did this subject, came to interest you so much?
Yeah, I really am fascinated with trading and how there is so much psychology to it. And I started off in 1993 working with like people with PTSD pretty much. And I had a private practice and everything. In 2015, I became the first guy in America to start helping people with PTSD to qualify for state medical marijuana programs. And so I had the opportunity to talk to 17,000 people, which I think very few people have had. And I really kind of learned so much about PTSD that people don't know. Like if you were to look up PTSD, there's no definition. It's just a list of symptoms. And
Right.
so so the way I define it is it's really all about adrenaline. And I'll get to this, but adrenaline is what is every trader's enemy. So
Mm.
yeah, so we have two brain systems. One is I call the robot, and it's logical and it's your willpower and it's, analyzing stuff like that. But then you also have the cat. So if you could picture maybe a robot riding on top of a cat, and the cat is your emotional brain, it's your fight or flight, but it's also your intuition. And of course, we need it. Sort of like your head and your heart. And the robot can influence the cat, like if it pulls on the reins a little bit. But I think that's where people go wrong is they think that they can just outthink their problems or they can have enough willpower to overcome whatever emotional noise is going on for them. And the thing is with PTSD, but also with trading, if you have emotions, if you have adrenaline, it's going to compromise your robot and you can only do so much. So that's what I think really happens anytime people have any type of mindset issue is that your logical brain isn't functioning as well as it should be. And even if you're trying really hard to make that happen, you just can't always do it. And then, of course, people feel really frustrated or they feel like a weak person if they can't. And then that makes everything worse.
That's fascinating. But before that, let's just sort of go back to the 17,000 people of PTSD. What type of people were they? Did you start working with soldiers, or did you find PTSD? I mean, at that time, I think PTSD was primarily sort of a military term, right? Before people kind of realized that there was lots and lots of different PTSD trauma in the world. Or
Right. Yeah. We all have that archetype that we think of, which is like a broken down combat veteran.
Right.
But there's so many different types of trauma, and one thing that kind of annoys me is if somebody were to research PTSD, you're reading only about the most extreme cases, or same thing with like autism spectrum disorder, you're reading about the most extreme or ADHD or whatever. So yeah, it's a lot more nuanced than that. And it could be from just like growing up where you have to have adrenaline. Like let's say you grow up in a chaotic household and you just have to have adrenaline to be bracing yourself for the next thing that's going to happen. That's going to cause, in my opinion, PTSD, because what we're talking about here is a higher baseline of adrenaline. And then, of course, it goes up faster than it does for other people and it goes down slower. So I
Right.
think that's really just the bottom line. Yeah.
To go back to your robot cat analogy, would it be fair to say that in your model, basically when we're trading and the level of adrenaline increases to such a high state that the cat is no longer can no longer be controlled by the robot. In other words, the cat is just so wild, or it simply eludes any attempt by the robot to control it, and that's what creates tilt, effectively.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I named it a cat because, cats are a pain in the ass. You can't get them to do what you want.
I don't have cats; I have dogs.
But you know what else, Boris? It's not just in cases like that. I mean, of course, when you're on tilt and you're out of control, that is what's happening. But
Right.
there's also mindset leakage. So what I call any type of compromise from your emotional brain, and that could be even just like pressure that you've put on yourself to do well, or like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
and it yeah.
in my trading room, you're absolutely right. We talk about this all the time. That
Okay.
90% of trading disasters are not the result of your strategy or even your execution or even anything trading related. 90% of stuff, whenever I interview, I do sort of feedback from like, well, what happened in this particular case? It's always like, I was in the middle of this thing. My daughter came in, she asked me some stupid question and totally took my focus off the thing and I couldn't get back into it. And then, I just started to go off and I started to go, or, the dog started barking just as I was doing this, or I got some terrible, news that had nothing to do with trading, but like it totally affected my trading. And like the stories that are non-market based that drive massive, trading failures in many ways are far greater than the stories that are market based. The market itself, of course, is its own destabilizing agent. It can really play
Yeah.
mind games with you. But ironically, I find the more we do debriefs, literally like sometimes 50, 60% of blow up cases is a function of completely non-market related factors.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? And
Yeah.
we could tell ourselves, "Oh, well, I'm just going to stay steady. I'm going to follow my rules. I made rules to help me follow my rules, and I'm gonna stay, like, laser focused." And that's often you're just kind of deluding yourself. You're telling yourself what you wanna hear because you are going to be affected by factors like this. And another thing is that a lot of what affects us is subconscious. And the definition of that is whatever we're not conscious of, what we're not aware of. So
Yeah.
if you were to think to yourself, well, what kind of subconscious issues do I have? You can't get the answer to that
It,
because,
it's the answer itself is impossible to get. That's right.
yeah,
If it was conscious, it wouldn't be subconscious, and therefore the point being is that your own sabotage is completely untraceable. You can't discover it ahead of time, is what you're saying, right?
a
Because it's subconscious, because those are triggers that just come in without you being even aware of them.
well, I have developed a method. I had an app that I was going to sell to the military, and it could actually treat PTSD better than a live therapist. It uses eye movements, which is from EMDR, and if you don't know what that
What's
is, it's
EMDR? Yeah, can you
yeah,
tell our viewers?
yeah, sure. It's the most heavily researched intervention for PTSD in history. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's popular. I mean, if you don't know what it is, you'll know somebody who's done it. But I was going to change the world and get rich, and then the whole thing kind of fell through because of business reasons. So I took this a PTSD approach, and I had actually created a therapy called de-adrenalization. And so then when I realized like I could use this for traders, then it was just perfect for that. But what we can really do, Boris, is we can access the subconscious so that people can, instead of like thinking back, okay, what was I doing an hour ago? What was I feeling? What was I aware of? What was I not aware of? You can move your eyes and be able to really kind of recreate what was going on inside of you. And then that's like so diagnostic, but also can be remedying whatever was
Hmm.
bothering you at the time. So it's really fascinating how it works.
So how does this process work? I think you can share a screen with us, maybe give me a little bit of a flavor of
Oh
what this
yeah, great.
works. So this
So
is
yeah,
what again? Could you repeat what this stands for? The acronym?
EMDR, so it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
And
It's been
reprocess.
around since the 80s. And if for your audience at home, if you'd like to watch this, you just need to have your head close enough to the screen so that your eyes are pretty much going all the way back and forth. And then you can ask yourself, for example, what has been stopping me from reaching my goals? And then if you could move your eyes back and forth like this, you
Mhm.
probably want to maybe turn the sound off so that you can focus on this when you watch it on YouTube or whatever. But yeah, this is what is going to help people to not only de-adrenalize themselves, but it can reach what's going on inside of you and you can discover on a deeper level what's happening.
What's the physiological reason that this creates? Is it because you're forced to focus on this dot and everything else sort of fades away, and that opens up your conscious to analysis? What's the reason that this is helpful?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That is one of the theories that you're kind of occupying that robot brain of yours,
Yeah.
and it's kind of just getting it out of the way so that you can do what you gotta do subconsciously. It's kind of like replicating a rapid eye movement when you're dreaming,
Uh,
because when you're dreaming, that's all subconscious.
right.
But you know what? They don't actually really know. There's been so much research on this for years because it's a subconscious phenomenon. So science, is incredible, but it can't explain meditation or mindfulness or dreaming or
Mhm.
hypnosis. And this is one of those things. It's really kind of like hypnosis, but there's no trance and you don't have to,
And how
you know,
long how long does the process usually take place with a person? Like how long do they sort of stay in this fugue state, looking at the dot?
well, I integrate it seamlessly with talking. So it's like when I'm coaching clients, we'll use this a lot in the beginning.
Oh, so
Um,
you're telling them, look at this dot, and you're doing a kind of an intake with them, and you're doing a whole question and answer therapy. And so that I suppose I guess what happens is they're so focused on this that it relaxes them and they're able to express themselves. Is that part of it?
Well, I don't talk to them while they're moving their eyes because that would be engaging their logical brain.
I
So
see.
yeah, they take some time, just do like 30 seconds at a time. And then when I'm working with people, we do kind of a diagnostic phase first where we try to figure out like all the stuff that's been going on. But then like it's so cool, Boris, like how you can shift things in your subconscious. Like for PTSD, you would have somebody rewrite the story so that instead of getting into a car accident, they rewrite it so that they just like drove home and everything was fine. If you had a really bad loss or if like there's a pattern of losses and it's hard to deal with, we could rewrite that story so that it could be whatever people come up with. And my favorite thing is that I'm not telling them what to do. I'm creating the conditions for people to make the subconscious changes that they need to make.
What do you find common amongst people who have a high degree of resilience? I mean, I find a lot of people, of course, we know people who suffer through far greater trauma than any normal human being and actually, are pretty normal and sometimes incredibly successful. And then other people who have just the slightest bit of trauma and are forever hobbled by it for the rest of their life. What is it? Is it this ability to rewrite the script or to sort of look that to believe that the future is going to be different than the past and therefore you are free or unencumbered of all this past nightmares that you have? I mean, what I'm just curious as to like what having worked with obviously PTSD people, you must have also seen the successful ones. The most successful ones probably have a higher degree of recovery. And what is that factor that unites them all?
Yeah, that's great. There is so much research on that. And one of the factors, I hate to say this, but like if you had a really good childhood and your parents were attuned to you and they listened to you and your mom was like really there for you and stuff, that's how you kind of like have that hardwired into you that you're not going to have those spikes of adrenaline. And I hated to say that because like I just remember being in grad school and they would be talking about this. I'm like, well, so like I didn't have that. Am I screwed for the rest of my life? You know? And then they would just say, well, go to therapy, just go to therapy. And I have a real problem with talk therapy because whatever you focus on, you magnify.
Oh, I
And
agree. I agree.
yeah,
I
you're
think it's the most toxic thing in the world to constantly turn over the problems, to obsess. In fact, I sort of find that this is what I mean. My point about people who are resilient. People who are resilient sometimes suffers. I've known people who've suffered the kind of trauma that people couldn't even imagine and come
yep.
out of it not only to fully functioning, but highly, highly superior human beings in a sense of that they are very active, intellectually engaged, physically strong, and emotionally stable. And the unifying force was that they were just simply able to compartmentalize that was the past, and they're creating a future that's different than their past, and they have the confidence to create that future that's different. I wondered, like, and I think talk therapy kind of only amplifies the past. It just simply,
Yeah.
toxifies the past into your past becomes your only present, and you become essentially a slave to your former narrative instead of being a free person on your future narrative.
I have to agree, and you're defining yourself as having a disorder, like, as a survivor of
Right.
whatever trauma you had, and, like, I've had therapists or even coaches say to me, "Well, how can you fix a problem if you don't know what caused it?" And what I say is, like, people are not like cars. You can't just trace it all the way down to the starter solenoid, and then their
Right.
life runs beautifully. Like,
Right.
yeah, if you're in Hartford and you wanna go to New York City, then do you need to know everything about Hartford and study Hartford and look at maps of Hartford? Or do you need somebody to show you where Route 91 is and
Yeah,
then where
you just need to
you
get on
just go
91,
to New
right,
York?
and get to New York, right? Which, by the way, is a very nice town. I drive through it all the time when I go to Boston. But yeah, I kind of agree. I think people get lost in the minutia and forget the big principal thing. Now, when you were again, sort of what fascinates me is you had this incredibly deep history with, you said 17,000. Was this like 17,000 interviews over a course, obviously, of years in your clinical experience? What what sparked the interest in working with traders? What were you yourself interested in the markets, or did you sort of started coming across traders and realized, oh, these guys, these basically trading. I always make a joke, but I absolutely that serious about it. Trading is like being at war without having the bullets, and the shells thrown at you every day. I mean, the market, it's the exact same. You're in a foxhole. Things are coming out at you from every angle. You don't know what's going on. You're just trying to survive. And of course, it creates the exact same kind of, hyperkinetic PTSD experience. What's the story there in terms of your own personal history with markets?
Yeah, so my wife's uncle is the first guy that I worked with who was a trader, and
Mm,
I was able to really set him straight like pretty quickly, and he's doing awesome now. He wasn't doing so good before.
mm.
But you know how like people say that you are who you associate with? And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, I've been associated with the most damaged people in society since 1993. So yeah, I really do like working with successful people, people who are really motivated
Mm,
to be their best. But
right.
also I have to say that like I could help somebody with PTSD turn their whole life around. They don't know how to quantify value. They think they should just keep paying with their insurance. And with traders, so it's like apples to orange comparison for PTSD people. With traders, they can see that if they invest some money with me, then they're going to make a whole lot more. So it's like an apples to apples comparison, and then we can help them have an orchard, and they can have as much apples as they want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, understood. So do you run a like a one-on-one workshop? Do you do workshops? How do you work with traders these days?
Yeah, so if you work with me, you would have 8 weeks where you just get enough of me as you want, or as too
Mhm.
much, who knows? But we usually do make a lot of progress in the first week or two, and then I'll be kind of on call for you. But we do diagnose, what's going on, and then we just really start to one by one. We set them up and knock them down, like the bad habits that you have. We can rewire them like very quickly, and then there I actually have like this Chat GPT powered coach that can actually do the type of therapy that I do, and I have all these training videos and stuff, and you can text me and call me. So like you're going to get better. Like if you have any type of issues, then we're going to fix those if you apply to work with me, and then we'll figure out if we're a good fit or not. And then like I'll just do anything I got to do for people to figure
Do
it
you know
out.
sort of the standard protocol that I always hear from a lot of coaches is you have to journal your trades and, constantly go back in history and reanalyze what you did and try to learn from your mistakes. And then you see the pattern, and then the pattern becomes familiar on the screen, and therefore you're going to react more familiar on the screen, stuff like that. Is that true, or do you think that that's sort of a panacea?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a panacea. I mean, you do have to do that to see long-term patterns in terms of what you're doing, like on a
Right.
technical level. But like I had mentioned before, like you're going back in time, which is going to lose some in translation, and then you're trying to use your conscious brain to figure out what you were doing subconsciously. So you're losing so much there. On my ChatGPT app, you can actually use that every day after your session, and it'll take you through the eye movements, and then you can really recreate very with high fidelity what was happening for you. And then because like there's just so many things we can't put into words, and this will help you to really understand what's happening. Like I've had other coaches say like you got to journal like as soon as you wake up or right after the session, or like what they're really trying to do is get you to be more in touch with your feelings, and if
Right.
you can just do it with eye movements, that accomplishes that really
Yeah.
fast.
I have a absolutely selfish reason for asking is because I hate to journal. I never journal, and but I'm a perpetual student of this because I've been trading for 30 years, and I still have plenty of my demons left. It's just I've just learned, I guess, to create all sort of coping mechanisms to control my demons a
Well,
little better.
it's really refreshing to hear you say that you still even have your demons, because I think a lot of people, they just don't want to feel like they have psychological problems. And what I say is like if you're an athlete, like you need to work on your mental game. I mean, you can't be in the top 5% of people who make money if you're not working on your mental game. And if it doesn't mean that you have a problem, it's just skills that you need to develop.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and I think like if you talk to any athletes, especially I used to play tennis. Unfortunately, I don't anymore. But like I always really, really, really tennis to me is the closest sport to trading because it's an individual sport and is totally mental. I mean, there's of course there's a huge level of technical proficiency, but once you kind of get to a certain level, it becomes much more mental. And when you interview all the tennis players, they always say that their single most important thing that they work on, from Djokovic to Federer, is actually their mental state of mind. And they're always saying that what differentiates me is just me. I, of course, yes, you want to do exercises, but that's not, that's not the end all. It's always the mental state of mind that keeps them alive. I
Sure.
actually find tennis is like a fascinating metaphor for trading because there's just so many interesting similarities to the two. Um,
Yeah, right. And you could practice all day, and you do fine, but then when you're in the match and the money's on the line, it's a whole different thing,
Yes,
isn't it?
it's always it's amazing. Like it's always like you see even the greatest athletes in the world will choke on a serve or choke on a serve return when my dogs are barking. So we'll choke on a serve return, at a moment of high pressure, and that's actually sort of like the key point. So you've, I'm sure, analyzed that point of success or failure a million times. What is the predominant reason that people deviate? Like the most common thing, tell me, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but the most common thing, at least in my room, is you're trading, you're trading, you're trading. You hit a loss, right? Maybe you absorb one loss. You hit a second loss, now you're a little bit uncomfortable, right? You hit a third loss, now you're pissed beyond belief. And this is a room of day traders, so this happens. The frequency level here is quite high. And now you are no longer in the business of running your strategy. You're just in the business of getting back at the market. And then, that sort of almost always trips people into a tilt because they're like, ah, God damn it, I got to get all this money back. And now I'm focusing on making money back, not focusing on making my best trade setups. I'm sure that's probably a very common pattern you've seen amongst traders, right?
Oh,
Um,
totally. Yeah.
and what is the predominant trigger that what is the unifying force there that slays all of us? Doesn't matter whether we're a PhD or a cab driver or anything in between. This is a universal pattern that slays somebody with 150 IQ and somebody with a 95 IQ. What happens?
Yeah. Well, so if somebody asks themselves, like, why do I self sabotage? I don't actually think that's a productive question because you're going to find answers to that, which would be like, oh, because I don't want to be successful or because I'm a loser or whatever. And if you, it's such a kind of an
I
umbrella
think those are
of,
bullshit questions. Those are bullshit answers. Everybody wants to be successful. Nobody really wants to hurt themselves, consciously.
right.
They're doing it for much more different reasons than just like, fear of success is, I think, the biggest bullshit reason I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh my gosh, yeah, I totally agree with you, man.
yeah,
And I think, like, people try to fill in the gap of knowledge, like, what is going on there?
yeah,
But that would be like looking up, "Why doesn't my car go?" Like, there could be 100 different things, like,
mhm,
so, yeah, fear of success, I used to think I had that, I used to try to research that, but I don't think it is a real thing. And so, like, if you were gonna have a sort of unifying factor, I would have to say that it is adrenaline or any type of negative emotion. So, like, if you're afraid to pull the trigger on something, or if you're angry about this loss that you just had, I mean, that's really terrible. If you have pressure on yourself to make a certain amount of money, one thing I don't really like about prop firms is it's kind of training people to have these arbitrary
oh,
goals.
they thrive on this. I mean, their whole point is to create these trigger points over and over and over again. And it's interesting you say this. So that I always find there's two psychological responses. One is withdraw completely. Oh, I'm not, I'm too afraid now to make any trades. And the other response, which unfortunately is the response that I have all the time, which is like, F you, I'm gonna go double, I'm gonna go triple.
Yeah.
You want to hit me? I always call it the Tony Montana response. You
Yeah.
say hello to my little friend. You want to try to come at me, I'm gonna come at you 10 times harder. Of course, that's the John Cougar Mellencamp song, I fight authority always wins. I would say I fight the market always wins. So, but those two, that's an adrenaline based response basically most of the time, either to withdraw like a turtle or to just come, go wild hog, the risk, absent absent any sort of awareness of risk and just, go large.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once you start to go off course, I'm sure you've seen, like, then it gets worse. And then you try harder, and then it gets even worse.
Yeah.
So, like, as people or as men, like, we want to be active. We want to do something
Right.
if there's a problem, and to sit back and just kind of be like a Jedi or something and be like, fully balanced and be able to act when you need to act. That's what you got to do. But yeah, I think people just get so annoyed and pissed off or maybe even bored. And then they just got to try to make it happen. And then once you start to feel bad about that or guilty or shameful, then you're going to try harder and you're also adding adrenaline to the equation, and then the cycle keeps going until how much money have you lost?
Yeah. So, are there any behavioral factors or behavioral clues that you give people to try to break this cycle of spiking adrenaline, revenge, fear, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, so just moving your eyes, it deactivates your nervous system, so that in general helps. But one thing that I've had so
Sorry to
much luck
interrupt you.
with.
Can I ask you a question? So, do you like, let's say somebody lost in a trade. Is your advice then, hey, take your eye off the trading screen, maybe put your eye on this other screen, move your eyes for 30 seconds. Just do you actually tell them sort of create a physical break from all of this to stabilize yourself?
I do actually, yeah, I
Mm.
have a protocol for this, and if
Right,
you work with me, then yeah, you'll know exactly what to do in real time
right,
before, yeah, you go
right,
down the toilet. So yeah, that's really
right,
good. But
right.
but one thing that I've had so much success with is to get people to feel sad. And I know that sounds so weird, but if you think about it, if you feel sad about a bad trade, I mean, just maybe for like 10 seconds or a minute or whatever, you're accepting reality. If you're angry, then you're saying, "Oh, well, this should have happened, or I should have done this, or it should have gone this way," and you're not in reality. If you feel guilty, you're not in reality. Well,
Mm,
this should have happened, or I could have,
right.
if you feel any of these negative emotions, you're not in reality. If you can feel sad, you accept what happened, and then it's gone, and then you haven't added adrenaline to the equation, and you can move on and start fresh. So I mean, like, it seems so un-American, doesn't it? That you gotta
It
just
does.
like,
It does, but you kind of hit my heart because in Judaism, from where I come from, there's a, you said feeling sad. There is actually a protocol for how you mourn.
yeah, yeah.
It's called sitting shiva, where you sit for 7 days when a close family member is passes away, and you mourn for that 7 days, and then that's it. And then after that, you sort of pay homage to them for 1 year in the synagogue, and then that's it. And it's kind of like a so it really reminded me of, like, I was like, I want to sit shiva for my trade, where you basically
Yeah.
you have a certain set amount of time where you
Yes.
are warned, but the dictum of the religion is life goes on, you must go on, and you must sort of pick up your pieces and do this. So don't suppress it, but express it in a very controlled fashion, which that's kind of interesting. I mean, I never heard of that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you're right. We skip through the anger, we skip through the sort of the sadness process and go right either to anger or absolute fear, and that's a good point.
Yeah, I love that about Judaism. I
Yeah,
wish it was more prevalent because yeah, you have this protocol. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're doing it with a whole bunch of other people.
right,
Like, I'm Irish, partly, and then I went to a funeral when I was 14, and somebody gave me a glass of whiskey, and they're like, "Hey, this is what we do," you know?
sure.
But there wasn't, like, format to it, really.
Yeah,
And then, of course, that was really kind of trying to swallow your feelings. If you
right,
can, like you said, have a time limit. You're not gonna be moping for the rest of the day, or you're not gonna be
right.
overwhelmed with emotions. Then you move on. We humans are built to be resilient, and the only thing that really messes it up is complicated grief, which is like if you wish you did something different, or if you're angry, or if you're like, just can't accept what happened, then you're never gonna get over it.
So I'm sure you deal with that all the time because this whole idea. I probably guarantee you've had the situation where a trader has been successful for a year. He's really built up a nice bank. He's got account is doing. Then he goes. 1 week happens, and he loses almost everything. And so now he's in this horrible situation where his year's worth of trading has kind of disappeared in 2 or 3 days. I'm sure he's going through. I wish I had done this. I wish I had done this. I mean, this complicated grief period is almost natural at that point. How do you help people like that?
Well, oftentimes it's just so difficult to get them to admit that they did that. Like,
Mm,
because people see it sometimes as an overarching valuation of their character. Like,
right,
I must be a weak person if I were to let this happen, or like,
right,
why was I asleep at the wheel for that whole week or whatever.
right.
So,
Yeah,
like, sometimes people are just so angry that I can't actually help them that much, I have
yeah,
to say, and they just can't let it go. But yeah, if you can get them to sort of see that, it does happen to people, and they're not perfect. And it's kind of funny to me how, like, in people's lives, their wives or their, people in their family will be begging them to make some changes, and they could put them off. But then when the market exposes your weaknesses, then they're
yeah,
like, "Oh my God, I gotta work on this."
yeah. Well, I always say that nothing exposes your personality, not your sexual history, not your spouse, not your family, not even your friends, like the market. It just seems to be the one machine. I don't know why, but like that is it. If there's a weak point that we have, it will exploit it mercilessly. And that's kind of just a fascinating thing. People's
Yeah,
personality really, really becomes very raw when they interact with the market and where money is on the line. It's just, I think it's even more than money. It's just money, ego, you know, speed, all those things just kind of come at you. And, would you agree that it really, really taps into sort of the most basic id that we have, just the underlying, you know, basis of who we are.
the overwhelming indifference of the market. it doesn't give a shit about you.
Right. That's the other thing. That's true. It is literally like the most unrequited love ever
Yeah,
because people love the market and the market couldn't care less. In that sense, it's very brutal. It's very Darwinian and actually very, very
it is. Yeah,
accurate to how nature. I mean, nature couldn't care less whether we live or die. We think that we are dominant in the world. We're just passing through as a bunch of atoms, and something will replace us. But we're constantly looking for that validation. So, what are some of the success stories you've had with your students? You know, Give me, obviously don't reveal names, but just sort of tell us a little bit about some of your past things people you work with. What were their problems? How were you able to help them? What do they do? What was their realizations?
yeah. So, well, there's this guy that like I write about him in my book, the consistently calm trader. But his name was Tony, and he he made $700,000 in his first year, and he kind of didn't know what he didn't know. So like he had this sort of early success. And
Mhm.
then when things sort of started to turn for him, he didn't handle it well at all. And so like this took him 6 months, but he lost all of it.
Mhm.
And I mean, I felt so bad for him because I know what it's like when you do things that aren't in your best interest and they just don't make logical sense. But of
Right.
course, there's so much underneath that. So like, yeah, Tony, he was trying to provide financial security. I mean, he was very successful in his regular career, but he had parents that needed to be taken care of, and he wanted to travel with his wife, and he had kids in school and stuff like that. So just having that pressure was really tough on him, and it was something that he wasn't aware of, like how that was happening. And then he was just feeling like kind of out of control, and he was doubting himself. He never doubted himself in his career. He just made decisions and he went with them. And so
Mhm.
this was having making him question everything. And then yeah, to have lost everything, he was frozen. I mean, like it's not just fight or flight, it's fight, flight, or freeze. And so he didn't feel like he could even trust his judgment anymore. And he was totally frozen. So what we did was we did kind of rewrite that story, because I mean, in a way, that really was trauma. I mean, like you don't
Mhm.
have to go to
Sure.
war to have trauma.
No, of
Yeah.
course.
And so we also just really worked on how to down regulate your nervous system. Because we were accessing the subconscious, we uncovered other things. Like he actually had some dad issues. Like he felt like he could never live up to his dad. So like when things didn't go his way, he started to feel shame. And
Mhm.
so like guilt is, I wish I didn't do that, and shame is like, I'm not a good person. And then that's just gonna crush you. And so as a doer, as a hard worker, that's what rewarded him in his previous like career. He just tried harder, and he read everything. He messed with so many different strategies. He thought it was like, it's got to be a technical problem. It was all psychological. And because we were able to help him to have these breakthroughs that you would normally have, like if you did hypnosis, you could have huge breakthroughs, but I don't go there because all the trance and all that stuff, like you don't need to do that. But we had these huge shifts, and it was so great to see him so happy again. He said I feel like I'm free and pure now. So like when he trades now, he doesn't have this like sort of feeling that I'm not hitting my best. Like he feels like he's just unencumbered, and he lets sort of like the universe, like, this is what he says, he lets the universe flow through him. He just tries to get out of his own way. He sees what his intuition does. And by the way, I think that's why AI is never really going to replace us traders, because you need to have that human element. You need to have that intuition, and that comes from your cat brain. You need to get rid of the noise, but then you still do use that imaginative, creative
Oh,
part of your brain.
absolutely. As someone who's written 1,000 systems and still ultimately trade manually, I absolutely agree with you. The same trade, which looks exactly the same to the computer because the raw logic is the same, is a completely different trade based upon the context around it. And that context just simply can never be encoded in AI. It's the human context. It's understanding just a tiny little difference 15 minutes ago is going to sway whether this is going to be a buy or a sell. Makes all the difference in the world. So yeah, I agree. Like you can prototype the models, but you can't prototype the exact precise trade. I That, by the way, and all of the stat arbs and all of the quantitative funds, they literally change their trading style every 3 to 4 months because they fully understand that the market itself is changing and that there's no such thing as a permanent edge in the market. That's the other
Yeah,
thing that's kind of interesting is the market itself is not a fixed odds game. It's not like cards or blackjack. You can't count your way to setups because it's literally like what was I? How did I say it? It's like you start playing poker, it becomes baccarat, and then it becomes craps, and it becomes roulette, and it's that's the game just changes all around you, and you're still playing by poker rules.
yeah, right. It's kind of like chess too, right? I mean, you can study different openings, different strategies, and like, what would I do if this happened? But if you can change like the parameters of what you're doing or like different
Yeah.
situations, you're really just honing your instincts, right? I mean, like that's what it comes down to.
No, that's actually true. It's interesting that you were saying that sort of like he, in his calm state of mind, he's able to just absorb the market because I mean I had just my own personal experience. Friday was just a horrible day. I trade live every single day, so everything I do is just I'm. It's like you have to have a certain personality where you have to be complete exhibitionist to walk naked in public
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you're trading live. But I had just a horrible day. I just got completely decimated. But then I realized what I was doing wrong, right? And when I went off camera, I actually started to correct myself, and I got and I literally I had like eight, nine accounts that were all red. By the end of the day, five of them were green, which is like, considered what I was considered to be a huge win. But what's interesting is that when I went through that transformation, I got so much calmer in terms of, understanding what I was doing that tonight when I went into the market, I was able to read it. It same, same setup, same structures. Everything I read everything myself, but I was able to kind of take the trades that worked and avoid the trades that didn't, even though the signals were the same, just by calmly reading the market environment. I was in that state of like you were saying, where I wasn't pressuring myself to take a trade. I was actually calmly analyzing whether this is worthwhile or not. And even if it wasn't working, it was fine because I didn't really react like you said with adrenaline towards the mistake. It makes all the difference in the world. It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's supposed to feel good. And like if you look at other books or listen to any other trading guru, they're really kind of trying to get you to change your thoughts.
Right.
And like first of all, you need to be in a flow state where you're not thinking, right? You need
Right.
to be like acting or reacting. But also, if you're telling somebody who's full of adrenaline that they need to calm down and down regulate,
It's like telling
it's
your
like,
spouse to calm down when they're angry at
oh
you.
yeah.
It's the worst possible thing in the world. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I learned that one, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're telling somebody that they need to lower their adrenaline, it's kinda like telling somebody who's full of alcohol that they need to be sober.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so and then you
Not
try
let
to
them
do it.
know, right? Exactly.
Yeah, I also tried to do that. I can't just sober up, but yeah, if you what kinda I have a chip on my shoulder about people who think it's just that easy, that you just need to change your thoughts, change your attitude. I
Right.
can't control what the market does, but I can control my attitude. No, you can't.
Yeah.
Because your adrenaline is going, you have this automatic reaction. And then if you start to blame yourself because you
Right.
can't do what these other people told you to do, you feel worse, you have more adrenaline, and it contributes to that whole cycle. I
The
hate that.
the irony of the whole thing is that the market actually you can't control the market, but you can control your attitude. But the irony of this thing is the market is controlling your attitude. You're not controlling your attitude. The market is subtly, constantly controlling your attitude. And actually, one of my better breakthroughs was to understand that. It was like, oh, I took a trade, the market totally faked me out. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it faked me out. Interesting. Okay. All right, fine. I'll step back. Let's see what he wants to do next. Instead of, God damn it, I can't believe this was supposed to be a perfect setup. Why didn't this work? Blah, 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 blah. And you go into this whole recrimination thing. When you sort of understand, oh yeah, I got manipulated. Okay, fine. Let's play the next set of cards.
No shame in that.
No.
And you know what I'm like, what one thing I'm also really fascinated with, and one of the reasons I started working with traders is that battle. Like not the trading battle, but like the battle between discipline and impulse.
Mm.
And what I write about in my book is it's not really about winning the battle because once you get into the battle, and it feels terrible, that you're already kind of lost. Like if you're thinking like I really want to trade, but I shouldn't, and then the only way out of that whole dilemma is to just pull the freaking trigger because or run away from your computer.
Yeah.
But what I write about is how to prevent the battle from happening in the first place. That's how you win. You don't if you're in a battle and you're having somebody trying to tell you how to regulate your thoughts and tips and tricks and like do this, it's
You've
not going
already
to win.
lost. Right. You've already
Yeah.
lost. Interesting. So any, last minute kind of tips to how you could try to avoid engaging in the battle? Like what are some of the things that you recommend in your book that traders should be mindful of?
Yeah. So to really focus on your emotions and what sets you off, to try to, I mean, not necessarily intellectualize your way through it, but to regulate yourself, to like sometimes people will say they should meditate or exercise, and I kind of think that, like, yeah, those are good things, but they're not going to really fix the problem. I mean, like, if I was a cancer doctor and somebody said to me like, should I take vitamins, I'd be like, yeah, sure, go ahead, I don't know. But like, if you could do this type of eye movement thing, you could use my chat gpt coach, or certainly working with me, you're
Okay.
really going to fix the problem at the root. And I think that's what needs to happen. And not only are we going to be remedying the issues that you have, but we're going to be preventing you from getting off course in the future. I mean, it sounds like you, Boris, after so much experience, you were able to get right back on the path that you needed to and let go of that stuff. But I mean, I hope that people don't have to pay too much tuition to the
Uh,
market.
you're always paying to the piper for sure. And I think, the thing that kind of differentiates people who stay in the game for long versus people who kind of give up is actually the love of the game. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to have the love of the game to start with to be able to endure, all of its flaws. So, where could people reach you if they want to reach out to you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? Are you on X? Are you on YouTube? What's the best way?
I haven't done too much social media because I'm not like another trader where I can show all the charts and all the stuff I'm doing. Like, so if you go to my YouTube channel, though, there's a lot of stuff on there where you can see
Hmm.
what I'm all about. And then that has links to work with me, you can apply to work with me one-on-one, or the chat GPT coach and stuff. So yeah, that would be the best place to start.
Right. Awesome. So we'll put a link to your YouTube channel in our comments, and I'm sure. Well, this has been a really really fascinating conversation into the depth of the human mind, which is always very very interesting from a trading perspective. And it's been really, really wonderful having you on the show. I want to thank you again for being here, Dr. Bonanno, and for everybody else, guys. Subscribe. Please tell all your friends. The kind of information you're going to get here is a million, trillion, quadrillion, quadrillion times better than just the average guru bullshit that you're going to see on YouTube. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I see you guys, everybody in the market, for the trading battle. Boris Schlossberg, over and out.